Hello, everyone, and happy, glorious, sunny Wednesday. We're going to give it a couple of seconds so folks can log in. If this is your first time joining us, hello, my name is Sadie Uribe, and I'm the media producer for the Los Angeles Regional SBDC Network. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. The LASBDC offers no cost services through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. It's your tax dollars at work. The Los Angeles Regional SBDC Network operates 7 service locations throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. Our services are also offered virtually. Oh, click that wrong little button right there, folks. Let me get that slide going for you. And we are here to help. We empower small business owners by providing tailored solutions through personalized one-on-one business advising, cutting-edge workshops, and comprehensive programs, all provided at no cost. We are dedicating to supporting your entrepreneurial journey every step of the way. Gosh, Lori, I got so many windows going on. Now I know how you feel like when you're giving all these
Oh,
presentations.
I know. Sometimes the amount of windows is quite overwhelming. Well, hello and welcome, everybody. It definitely feels like it's summertime. I think the kids are out of school. Are they out of school yet? You'll have to tell me in the chat. Are your kids already out of school? I think if not, it's getting very close to that time period. Okay, let's get started with today's show. So, first and foremost, as I always do, here is my lineup of webinars coming up for June, end of June, as well as July. And as always, Sadie will put that information in the chat for you. By the way, before I get into the upcoming shows, Sadie is now and I are now going into our production discussion on Ask an Expert series, which we'll talk about it more next week and kind of give you insight on it. But that's going to be launching probably next month or so. So that's going to be pretty exciting. And by the way, Small Biz Talk's not going away. Don't anybody freak out. This is in addition to, okay? And hello to all my frequent flyers. I can see everybody's in the chat and saying good morning to each other, and that's wonderful. Hey, speaking of frequent flyers, we got some frequent flyers coming on in July. So July 2nd, Clarissa Wilson's coming on. Haven't had her on for a while, but many of you know Clarissa. Nerdy Numbers Lovers LLC. We're going to talk about many different topics as we always do. But one of the advantage with Clarissa is she also has a background in auditing through the IRS, especially with sales tax. I want to talk about that. Also get a lot of questions about using a spreadsheet instead of using a QuickBooks software, especially if you're just kind of starting out and don't have a lot of transactions. Clarissa created a pretty cool one, and I've asked her to demonstrate it on one of the other shows, and people really enjoyed it. Got a lot more questions about that. So I've asked her to come on and also demonstrate that spreadsheet. And the week after, Emma Green, one of my favorite frequent flyers, been on the show so many times. I love telling Emma's story, as I always say, and she's always got an update. So Emma will be on to give us an update. Speaking of updates, the next week, Samara Solve It HR, a constant on the show. And every time I have Samara come on, we go over so many new HR rules and then talk about what's happening with AB5, which even if you don't have employees, you're pretty much, stuck with AB5. And I love hearing what in legal terms is the precedence because some of the decisions in court regarding AB5 are starting to come through, and Samara stays up on that so we can see kind of how the courts are deciding on it. So once again, a fascinating discussion with Samara, as we always do. Okay, Lori's Corner today, and I'm not going to be giving this enough time that it deserves in conversation. So if you have any questions about what I'm talking about, please just, reach out to me. But a lot of times people ask, what is the correct profit margin for my company, right? And in actuality, for a small company, there's no such answer that can be given. Now, I'm not saying for larger companies there isn't, but for a small company, no such answer actually exists. But many small companies are led to believe that's true. Let me explain further. What you're looking at here is just a kind of a brief diagram to explain what I call, and you hear me talk about the cost structure, okay? When I refer to the cost structure, it's doing calculations, mathematical calculations, collecting data. There's a whole process involved in it. But you can eventually come up with something that says, okay, out of 100% of revenue, 26% is my production. That's if you're a service or a product business, and 74% is left over, which is basically your gross profit, right? Then out of that gross profit, 46% in this case is divided to expenses and 27 is net income. These numbers change with each and every single business model. This could represent somebody, well, let's take two companies that are making soap and selling them at a farmer's market. Let's be really, really simple. This could represent one company's buying of the raw materials and making the soap at their kitchen table. They got 75% left over, 74% left over. Now, this could also represent some company that is buying the product already made and redistributing it. And this could go up to 36%, which changes this number, which changes this number, and it always ends up changing the net income, guys. So when you look at a business model, the minute you take from one area, it subtracts the other areas and the net income is reduced. That's why the cost structures are so important. Now, why do I say that you cannot apply a industry gross profit to a small business? I want you in your mind's eye to picture like a Kroger or an Albertson, some kind of big grocery store. You could see they all got about the same footprint, they got the same employees, same wages they're paying, and if you go behind the back, you even got the Cisco trucks, right? So when you get to these large companies, they're competing for market share, and what happens is they have the same distributors, they have the same employees, et cetera, et cetera. So you can say, well, by industry standard, they're all operating around this gross profit margin for a grocery store. The Whole Foods operate around this amount. But small companies, and this is the greatest thing, we are flexible, we're agile, we have different business models, we have different structures. Some people work from their home, some people have office space. It's all over the board. So to say, well, I'm in the soap industry and my margins are this is just not correct. It's just not correct, guys. So you really need to do the calculations because it's just like if you have a home budget, you make a certain salary and then you pay out rent, you pay out bills, discretionary income's what you have left. And if you have higher bills or higher rent or less income, that discretionary income gets reduced. Same thing happens in a company. And this is what gets reduced as the net income. So that's to explain why a gross profit margin is specific to the companies, why it needs to be calculated, why you can't look at an industry standard, and why you have to actually do the math for yourself. Once again, if any of that is something you're interested in, you can take one of my CFO classes, reach out to me, million ways to find more information on that. Let's get into the excitement of today. Sue Atwal is an early childhood educator that took her passion for learning and working with kids to ultimately open her own preschool. As a preschool curriculum developer, Sue is well known for promoting early education and helps children reach their full learning potential through tailored instruction. She also has privately worked with students in their toddler years who have then qualified for John Hopkins Center of Talented Youth and Mensa by the age of 5, including her own daughter, who was American Mensa's youngest child to join with an IQ over 145 at 2 years old. Sue is with us today to learn about her entrepreneurial journey and the creation of the Modern Schoolhouse. Welcome, Sue. Welcome to the
Thank
show.
you. Thank you, Lori, for having me.
Okay, so I have to first ask, what is it like to have a toddler with an IQ of 145? I mean, toddlers in general are challenging, but what's
Yeah.
that like? But that's a fascinating. Can we just talk a little bit about what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the early on assets that I feel like I had as a parent was because I've been in the education realm. It was a little bit easier than the typical average parent that is not in their career field of education. But just early on, my daughter always exhibited different skills and just grasp concepts really easily. And it wasn't until we took her around 18 months where we started noticing certain things that were just a little bit different in terms of her retention and her memory and recall. And so that kind of led us to explore other options in terms of, what's really going on here. Especially when I would tell my husband, I'm like, this is not typical for a almost 2-year-old to memorize these things or the context of things. And yeah, long and behold, when we had her evaluated through a child psychologist, that's kind of what the results came through. And we were very novice, and she was like, yeah, her score is this. And we're looking at each other like, what does that mean? And, that's when they kind of further explained where her abilities were, and that kind of placed her in the 99.9 percentile.
Wow. And it's fascinating because, right place, right time. I'm sure the influences of all this together led into how you develop the curriculum in the school. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go back.
Okay.
Let's go back. I love going back to when people are in high school or college trying to figure out where they're going to go. Was this something you always had a passion you knew? Was this a direction? Give us those early beginning stories.
Yeah, it's a little interesting because I feel like so in high school and college I was an NCAA sport athlete, so I played volleyball, and I kind of untraditionally played, but I always had a mission. I knew I was never going to go collegiately, or I mean, outside of being collegiate, I wasn't going to go professionally. I think that's where my boundary was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to get college paid for, and we're going to get this degree, and we have another game plan. And I feel like those that really invest sports in all of their life, sometimes they can't see that far beyond because, we're told that to be famous and to be celebrities and these athletes that everyone looks upon, that's the end goal. And I think a lot may be credited to my environment, my parents, where it kind of shifted my nature to say that's not going to be possible for everyone, and I do need to have a plan afterwards. But did I know I was going to end up as an entrepreneur? Absolutely not. Somehow, some way, every avenue of life that I walked, I always ended up around kids, and I felt like that was something that was my calling. I just didn't know exactly how. So, leading out of high school and college, I went through the liberal arts psychology route. In the beginning, in college, I wanted to be in media relations. Then I wanted to be an OT therapist. So it was different things, but again, everything always gravitated me back towards children. So I fully went on and received my teaching credential to be an elementary school teacher. And that's kind of how I started my education journey. Shortly after, when I moved to Los Angeles, I realized there were multiple opportunities to do that, and also explore how childcare works. And so I became a private nanny, traveling teacher for a lot of celebrity clientels that live in Los Angeles. And so I did that for quite some time. And it really shed a lot of light in terms of regardless of the resources and the lifestyles families live, the nature and nurture of children is very pivotal to how it'll shape their long-term lives. And
Wow, I gotta I don't wanna let what you just said go by without bringing
yeah.
it to the foreground. So really what you're saying is it doesn't matter whether you have all the wealth, all the resources, how that child is nurtured is really the aspect that feeds mostly into the development. Am I okay the way I repeated that?
Yeah, no, I think you hit it spot on. And, obviously there's going to be outlier situations where, someone may have the gifted abilities and you're just honing in on those and kind of providing additional support. But I think overall, if you take a group of children and you learn how to properly speak to them and how to cater to their social emotional needs while providing them the academic skills that are going to play long-term effects in their schooling years, I think that's where we miss the target. And similarly to my high school, college sports stories, everyone's always fixated on where we want to be in the future. And we oftentimes forget the path that takes us to that future. And so when we talk early childhood education, education, it's often, especially here in the United States, it's just looked as a means. It's a babysitting service, and that's where we have to shift it, because these first 5 years are so pivotal. It's their experiences, it's their peers, it's the way these adults speak to them, it's how they engage with them in these lesson plans and create the routines and structures and set boundaries that are going to develop their skills to be lifelong learners.
You know what resonates with me, and I find it really well. First of all, I have to make this one thing. As you were speaking, I kept thinking about that statement that we spend the rest of our life getting over what happened to us in the childhood. That's so
Yeah.
true. But as you were speaking about the getting to the end and not looking at where you are presently, I think that is so true of entrepreneurs. If we can say the child entrepreneur that's suddenly getting into business is already talking about, I'm exaggerating, but not so many times. It used to be this way 10 years ago, how they're going to be an IPO, and I always
Yeah.
tell people you haven't even figured out what you're selling to who, and you're already worried about the legal structure and how much taxes you're going to pay.
Right.
Seem to have taken that same model of let's just run down to the end goal, even in our entrepreneur type journeys. It's like across the board. And I think it's so refreshing, Sue, to hear you say as a reminder to step back and look at where we are now and start identifying the pathway. So thank you for bringing that up. I think I keep saying I want intelligence, book knowledge, love it, want more, but I really am hungry for wisdom right now. And I think that's
Yeah.
very wise statements.
Thank you. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think for other entrepreneurs that are here, I didn't, take business classes. I didn't take, I did not know I was going to end up here, but it does, well, a lot of the behind the scenes things that you don't see is the grit that goes behind it.
Yeah,
Everyone thinks I'm an entrepreneur. I don't have to work. That's not true. You actually work more
you
than the
do.
typical 9 to 5, because your brain is constantly going. This is your passion project that now you're putting out into the world. So those 40 to 50 hours that you thought were long, it just turned into 60 to 80 hours, if not more. And I think that, as you create and find what your path and what your business model is, kind of just going off your diagram with the soap, we're not reinventing the wheel here. Everyone's going to sell soap, but how you do it, how you deliver it, the small intricate details that make small businesses what they are over large corporations is very important. And when you have sole control over that, that's what is going to separate you. And so
It's
when
so
we
true. Yeah.
yeah, I was just going to say, and so that's when we look back at, yes, preschool is preschool, but what is it that we're missing? One, it's something that's not going anywhere. We're going to have kids, even though our rates are slightly lower. We're going to have kids. We have to have kids, in order for things to continuously progress. But how can we shift the paradigm where it makes sense and it's also revolutionizing the system? And that's kind of what, I feel like, with my educational background, my research, everything that I've done has led us to do.
Yeah, perfect, beautiful. I'm gonna go in this one direction, but before we do, your statement about working more hours excessively is so true. I have had so many calls with SBDC clients, and one of them the other day was kind of the epitome of this. She said, "I want to start my own company because I want to work less hours, make more money, and have control." She literally said that and thought
Yeah.
that was true. I'm like, well, you're gonna get absolutely the opposite.
Yeah.
There's a misnomer on that. But so take us back in time to right before you jump into being an entrepreneur. Where were you? What were you doing? And what was the stimulus that said, I'm going to go do this?
So I've always been, as I mentioned, in some realm with children. So when I was actually pregnant with my daughter, I was teaching in a classroom, and then obviously we go into summer break. It wasn't going to be as feasible for me to be on my feet so much and working with kids. So I shifted my career. I was still had nanny experience, but I decided to move into the newborn care specialist route. So what newborn care specialist is it when parents have infants or babies that they would like to sleep train, or moms just don't have grandmas or other additional support. They would hire me at their home and I would come in around 7 p.m. and leave at 7 a.m. So I basically worked
Oh,
like a night shift. And you do all aspects of the baby care. You help train the baby to sleep through the night. So generally around 10 to 12 weeks, I would start with them at like around 2 weeks. And then at the 10 to 12 week mark being with them, we would basically have a schedule already in place where the baby's sleeping 10 to 12 hours a night. And we're limiting our feeding sessions so mom can obviously sleep through the night as well. So I started there when I was pregnant. It worked well with my schedule. So I had my days free to go to doctor's appointments and do all of these things. And then I was working nights. And then once I had my daughter, about a month into it, we found childcare. That's kind of my first time, I think, learning the childcare realm of how long wait lists are. You think you have time, but you really don't. So we got on, fortunately, when we found out we were pregnant, and we still didn't get care until after. And so that's about, 12, 14 month wait list there. And
wow.
once I had my daughter, I was actually an estate manager. So I went back into what I knew, and that's where I learned more of my administrative duties. And I was working for the VP of Facebook at the time. And then I worked there for about a year and a half. And right before COVID, I was actually let go in January of 2020. Surprisingly, it was very caught off guard. I don't know exactly, all the intricate details, but at that point, that was my turning point, I think, as a mother, to be like, what am I going to do now? And that was my turning moment of, I'm never going to allow someone else to dictate. One day I have a job and the next day I wake up and I don't. And my whole world comes crashing down all at once, because you think all of the things that could happen. Regardless of the growth mindset you have a child to take care of. And, we had to figure it out. And I think I was just caught so off guard that, being somewhere for a year and a half, and then all of a sudden you just walk in the new year, and then you're let
Yeah.
go with, no
No,
notice.
it's interesting because what you just said was the same thing that prompted me to become an entrepreneur back at 23, 24. Is that I had worked for a series of two or three small companies. I was back in the day, I was more in a sales position, but you get all the customers. I worked myself up to this position, and then the companies went under. Like literally, they were
Yes.
small companies, and was like, okay, the partners are splitting up, they're gone, and then I get to the next
Yeah.
one. Oh, and I said, you know what? If it's going to close, I'm at least going to be in the front line where I know, it was the same thing. I just didn't want the rug pulled out from underneath me anymore. And I was ready
Yeah.
to take on. So I just had to say that really resonated with me. So from there, what did you do next? Did you know you were going to start the Modern Schoolhouse? How did that come into being?
I took it as an opportunity to learn in a calling, and so to say.
Okay.
At this time, things were slowly starting to shut down. We didn't get the official COVID shutdown until March, so things were already slow at this point. Some businesses had started closing, and I think everyone saw it coming on the horizon. I don't think we anticipated it to be so
Oh,
long,
yeah.
but we did see it shifting. And so I used this opportunity to learn and take it as, okay, now I have the opportunity. What do I want to do? And at this point, I did have the thought of, this is what I want to do possibly long term, after I had the opportunity to stay at home with my daughter and do these things. And that's when the SBDC came up, and I had no idea what the SBDC was at the time. And it's not, again, I didn't go to business school. I didn't have this stuff. And, I have this conversation a lot, just to rewind. When you're in school and I'm getting my teaching credential, they teach you how to be a teacher in the classroom. They tell you
Right.
how to go apply and how to go interview, but they never say you have the opportunity and you have the bandwidth, or you have the capabilities and the background to run your own business with teaching, or tutoring business, or daycare, or babysitting, or even an in-home daycare to begin with. And I really wish when they do that, they would give you some avenue, at least for those that it would retain, to have the opportunity to learn. And so I learned about the SBDC. I jumped on. They have open hours I was in Pasadena at the time, so that was the location I was visiting. And I met a great handful of people in the Pasadena location that kind of guided me in terms of, okay, this is what you need to do. We created a landing page. I came up with the name that very week, and then we started going forward. And, they really helped me get my feet wet into this process of being an entrepreneur and then really understanding all the things you have to have all your ducks in a row, they say. You really had to have all of this stuff to really hit the ground running, because once you hit the ground running, you're either going to fly or you're going to crash, and there's no in between. And it's they say the first 3 seconds is the lasting impression, and that's just really what it was. And so I had to really put my grinding ears on and get to it.
Well, and here's a shout out to the Pasadena SBDC and Annie, if she's with me today. Annie, the one who said, I said, hey, I'd like to have some new guests. Do you know of anybody? And she suggested to have you on the show. So a shout out to Annie at the Pasadena SBDC. And I want to just make a quick comment to what you said about going to school and them not really talking about the fact that your skills and abilities that you're learning can go in many different directions. I think that's true across all platforms. Many of us go to school, we learn a skill and ability, and we don't realize how marketable it can be. And when we start to realize, wait a minute, there's people in the marketplace, companies in the marketplace, I can sell this skill and ability, a whole world then comes into being. And so that's very, very true. Now,
Yeah.
your building, from what I know, is a physical location, which is
Yes.
usually, or I shouldn't say usually, I should say, which is the scariest leap of entrepreneurship, because you're not like going, okay, let me work from home for a little bit. You're now jumping into that. Take us back to that period of time when you had to make that commitment. Did you start immediately with the brick and mortar? Did you try to do something a little bit different? Walk us through that. People love to know how you go from the idea to the, oh, I'm scared, I'm going to do it, and then how the pieces start to come together.
Yeah, I think in the beginning, when I decided this is what I was going to do, I jumped on, I figured out all the rules and regulations. I had to go through them, get a better understanding. I made a lot of calls trying to understand, I think also another part of being entrepreneurs, you have to know your city and local and your state ordinances, right?
Yes, yes.
That pertain to your business. And so I'm looking at things like, what does zoning mean? What does this mean? And really having to learn the definitions. But once I figured it out, I jumped on a lot of seminars. I got the approved training to be a child care educator. I showed that I had the qualifications. So that was basically step one. I did not start at a brick and mortar in terms of I did, but I didn't. So we started off the smallest way possible, which was like an in-home daycare. I
Beautiful.
had 12 students, and everything was going well, and I was working with the SBDC at the time again to receive funding. And when COVID happened, we got to the underwriting process. We got approved at the very last step. Once COVID happened, a week later, I received a call, and they said they had to retract my application because I no longer met the qualifications because I was a new business. And that was kind of like the second punch to my gut in the last 3 months of like devastating information. Um,
Can we
and
walk back on one before you go forward on that, Sue? This
yeah,
is something out, you mentioned know your ordinances and regulations. Once again, you make these statements that have so much depth and wisdom. Many people get confused and get stalled because they realize there's a lot of regulations, or they
yeah,
don't do enough research and they miss a few. I know one thing, because had several companies that were in that space. When it comes to child in-house, whatever, it's a lot of regulations to go through. And you
yeah,
were not aware of any of them. If you were to just say to somebody, this is what you have to do, or this is how you get a checklist, or make sure you do enough, whatever advice to thoroughly check regulations, because Sue, I see so many people are getting in trouble because they start a business without fully knowing or recognizing the number of regulations that businesses have now and what they need to do.
yeah.
Can you give us some words of wisdom on that process alone?
Yeah, I think there's more resources out now available to the web than, there as years go on, we're obviously headed to more of a tech AI world. So there's a lot more resources available online. I think before signing any lease, before signing any documentation, you do your thorough research first. Sometimes things do seem too good to be true, but you'd rather have the information possible, and have the information there then and to make more informed decisions for later. So as you mentioned, just to give a debrief, state and local, state actually has like more general parameters, and then your local city ordinances have more strict. So whereas many people think I'm following state code, you also have to follow your city, and each city does vary. So even if you have, a soap shop in one city, another soap shop in a different city has different rules on how the building can look or how you can sell it or the hours or the noise. And these are all things you have to look at. And I heavily, heavily suggest looking online at your resources, calling your local agencies, or, the state licensing in terms of who's going to be providing your license, or your business license to get the information. They generally have checklists there, and they can provide you at least some guidelines so you have talking points where you can ask your questions where needed.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for delving in that for our audience. So you get then denied on funding that you really thought was coming through. I guess, was this a blessing and a curse? It seemed like a curse at the time, ended up being a blessing.
No,
And what
I take
happened?
everything out. When you get outside of the moment, you take everything as a learning opportunity. I think that's just the mindset you have to have as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. And that was my quick and okay, I wanted to enter on this. And this is just what it entails. And so at the time, we were still figuring out how to do this. Everyone closed, leasing applications closed, people were moving out. Obviously, rent wasn't being paid for multiple landlords. So, no one wanted to lease at this time. So it gave opportunities for me to get everything else in order. So during COVID, working on the website, looking at how to do proper marketing, what is guerrilla marketing, what is mail marketing, and, really understanding again the intricate details of what we align with our business and how did we want to come out to the world being represented. And so just allowing myself to work on logo design, learning how to use Publisher, create documents. Canva just came about. Canva is a great resource tool, for growing businesses. I wish I had it in the early on, when I first started, but really again doing the research. And I think when you do the research, a lot of things come easy, because if there is an issue, hey, we need reformatting, you know where to go. You don't have to learn something new at the time. So COVID did give me the opportunity, but it was a blessing because had I taken that on and signed a lease and now we end, in the middle of COVID, I'm now stuck with the lease and I'm not making revenue. And so that would have been terrible. And, and I always think, what would we have done at that time where we signed something and then a month later this happened? So it was definitely a blessing. It gave me opportunity for me to be with my daughter at home. And then shortly after we got her tested. And so everything I think happened for a reason. And with that, it gave me more understanding of education. And that's kind of where we pivoted our model. And we did the in house curriculum, where I also became a curriculum developer because I have my teaching credential and my background in education, working with younger infants and toddlers. I was able to apply these techniques and say, this is a tried and true method. And now, if we give this exposure to other children, we can get the same outcome.
You know what I love about your story, and I think another takeaway, and I always talk about this, is figure out how you can incrementally start to grow. Don't, if you can do something without having rent or without having high rent or et cetera,
Mhm.
right? Because so many times people see the big vision down the road and they try to create it immediately and they don't have the funding to do that. They don't have the
Yeah.
cash flow. So when did you go from the in-house to actually getting a lease and going to a brick and mortar? How did that come about? What did that look like?
Yeah, so when regulations and COVID lifted, It was about, I think, like 6 months into it. So it was around that August, September timeline. And so we went and we found a building that worked out perfectly. Just everything about it just made sense. And similarly, like you said, start small. So we started with just 12 kids. I was the main teacher, just made sure I had everything ready, went through all of that. And then that's kind of where we learned how the differences between state and city ordinance work, went through my loopholes with that. And then we opened. And then when my daughter's story kind of went viral, we had a lot more, I guess, free publicity for our schools. And that's where our
Okay,
wait
you
list
gotta
and our
back up.
schedule
So your
started.
your daughter's story went viral and that
Yeah.
created publicity for your school. That is amazing. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I think just having her story, it was one of those feel good stories. We're coming out of COVID. There's not a lot going on. You just hear all of these high rates and numbers and death tolls and things
Right.
like that. And then here you see this little 18-month-old on this TV screen and, a feel good story. And I think it attracted a lot because it brought back that like sense of normalcy to people. Like, look at this little girl, she's doing all of this and we're stuck in this time. But, I think it was just kind of getting everyone back out the rut, and it gained a lot of attention. It got picked up by every major news outlet. We were on Jimmy Kimmel. We went to New York to be on Kelly and Ryan. We met Steve Harvey in Atlanta, and it was such a great experience, just being able to do that. But, I think together, my husband and I, our parenting principles have always remained the same, that we're going to let our children lead the way, but we have to be firm in our boundaries with expectations. And that's just what we did. And, if we didn't feel comfortable with anything and how she was on camera, it was just naturally and organically who we were. And I think that attracted a lot of attention, just to say, we're not posing to be anybody, but they're also not just letting, kids just do whatever they want. There's some sort of structure. And I think that resonated a lot. COVID, obviously, there was a COVID boom of babies,
Yeah.
and we had that, um and it couldn't have worked out. And I think, as you mentioned, it was a blessing in disguise. Everything leading up to that had to fall in place in order for that timeline to work. I had to get laid off. We had to get denied, so we didn't sign the lease. Then we had to get this lease approved, and then me being in there at the time it did, for all of this to happen. And so, and that's just kind of been our mindset now, is if something happens, there's something else that's going to happen. And just like a bell curve, when you go up, it has to come down. And when you're
Yeah.
down, it has to go back up.
I
And
love that story, Sue. I love that story. And you know what I find, well, first of all, I love what you said about, discipline and structure, but also allowing creativity. I put creativity in there because that's kind of how I heard that, and leading the way. I love that. But I was thinking right before you said it is all of those pieces literally came together, that looking at it now, you have to say there was a plan. It was all planned out. I have to ask this. It seems to me, I get this sense it's your, and I'll use the words, and I don't know if they're right, Sue, so you go wherever you hear what I'm saying, but it was almost as your willingness to take every single situation and not make a judgment on good or bad, just kind of go, okay, yeah, let's see what happens next. I think that's kind of a beautiful way to work and flow with the universe, if I could just say it that way, because I'm looking
yeah,
at different words. But where do you think that, because a lot of us are like, oh no, that's bad, I got to fix that, and we go into the kitchen.
yeah.
You didn't. You were just like, okay, and then this came and this came. Where do you think you learned that? Were your parents that way? Where did you get this
It's
ability? I
funny.
got to
I
ask
do
that.
have to I do have to give a lot of credit to my husband. I think he was a
Okay.
great support system, and now we actually run the company together. He has a background in law, and he kind of does the back end work, the not so fun stuff up front. But I think our energies definitely were compatible. He was just like, we're gonna figure this out, and he kind of remained calm and was, okay, we're going to do this. We can't focus on this part. It happened. There's nothing we can do to control it. And I think having that strong support system did allow me to be like, even though in the moment I'm frustrated, or, I'm feeling emotional, it was that moment of, this is what we signed. It was that reminder of, this is what we signed up for. And, either we crumble now or we figure out a way to get out. And so it's constantly been like that. Again, that's just entrepreneurship. And I think having this platform to be able to explain, like you mentioned, real stories is very important, because when you see celebrities, they have either had the financial means to do so and have
Yep.
these billion-dollar businesses, or they've been set up generationally to have something passed on to them, where it's this isn't the true story for most small businesses. And it's a lot of hours. We're approaching year 5 this October, and we're still learning a lot. We're growing, but we're still learning. New things come, because you can't foresee every single thing that can go wrong or every single thing that can go right. And you do have to just have that mindset of, if this is what you truly want to do, this is what comes with it.
Wow, that amazing, just amazing wisdom, and you're so correct. I mean, we get so involved in trying to figure out every single little piece as we go along. We don't let the pathways evolve in front of us. So you've got the school, you've got the brick and mortar, you've got students, you've got the marketing through the wonderful experience with your daughter being on TV, also, which is just amazing. What was some of the biggest challenges as you started to move into this brick and mortar type environment versus the home? What started coming up? Anything that, wow, I didn't expect that, or I didn't see that coming, that the audience can learn from?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to understanding what is going to put you a separate from the rest. The biggest question, this is your passion, right? And so you think it's above all else. It's, I'm different, right? Just like every parent's like, my child's different. They're so smart. And that may be the case to you, but to the rest of the 7 billion people, how are you going to sell yourself differently? And I think when I got into this world, I was like, yeah, this is my design. I aesthetically do all of the designs. I have, picked out the furniture. Everything is from me. And I think that's what also makes us different, is you can see the amount of intent that's poured into each school, into each classroom. And I think my first kind of understanding of when I was going big was when I started touring. And there's some people that are like, well, we just don't, this is not the right fit for us. And it was kind of like, what do you mean? Like, what's wrong with it? What is not working,
How can you say
And
that?
yeah, how can you say that? Like, what else could we possibly add that would make you feel comfortable? And I think that was my first go at sales, right? Before
Oh, okay.
it was COVID, everyone needed childcare. We were kind of coming back to that. And this was now like, okay, we're going from 12 to 24, we're doubling, or 24 to 48, and now we're going to 84. How are we advertising, but also, do we have the proof and the concept behind us to be able to vouch for that? And so I think that was my first go at sales. And so I wish, at that time I had a camera to record my first tour and how I am now. And, you walk confidently versus being shy, and, more like, I hope they like it, versus, no, this is what you like. And if you don't like it, it's your loss at the end of the day. And it's that confidence, and it's not necessarily to be confused with arrogance, but it's just, you have to be confident in the product that you're selling in order for the um the public or your client base to be able to believe in it.
It's so true, and I think another thing that salespeople, haven't had a background in sales, understands that you can't sell everybody, so you quickly move on to the next, where the entrepreneur sees it so personally that if they don't convince every customer to buy, that there's something wrong with their business model.
Right.
Is that kind of
Yeah.
what you noticed too?
Yes, and I think that was in the beginning. And then you also, I think, just again, going back to my nanny experience and traveling teacher experience, and just even classroom experience, just working with so many parents, quite honestly, some just are going with the punches and they're trying to figure it out. And, we're here to be a guiding tool, but some believe that they are their ultimate child's teacher. They believe that they know their child best, which is fine. And so sometimes things just don't align. But I also think it's the misinformation that parents too have about childcare, right? As entrepreneurs, think there's this grandiose entrepreneurial life that you get to live in the first year. That's not true.
Yeah.
And I think parents also have this concept of, this is what childcare should look like. And unfortunately, as wonderful as social media is, it's also misconstrued a lot of the facts of the
Yeah.
prettiness and this is how play should look like. And, yes, have a playroom. No, don't have a playroom. Let them play outside. Let them be bored. Give them technology. It's a lot of contradicting information. And I think more so than ever, it's confusing this generation of parents of what's the right parenting and am I doing things right? And having that place of, comfort and, hey, we're going to help you get through this and we're going to work through these years together, help support these parents.
Yeah, that's so true about everything. I always say we have to have, and I've been using this word more than I've used it in my entire life in the last couple of years, discernment. We have got to have discernment as we go through the information, and we've got to be able, at the end of the day, go internally, do research, do knowledge, and internally, because otherwise we'll just go crazy with all the conflicting information.
Yes.
So now you're expanding.
Yes.
You're in the expansion phase. I'm going to leave it at that. Let's hear about what's going on in the expansion phase now.
Yeah, so this is leading up to one of our bigger years for year 5. We have a location actually in Pasadena that we're going to be opening. We also have a location in Duarte that will be opening. And then I'm originally from the Bay Area, and we are coming back down to the Northern California to open in Silicon Valley and San Mateo.
Wow, this is like huge expansion.
Yeah.
Okay, walk us through this because you're now obviously are not doing everything on your own. So you now have to delegate a whole lot going on. Talk about
Yeah.
all this.
Yeah, again, another learning curve. So as we expand, everyone's role grows. There's opportunity and room for growth for certain employees, and then you're also onboarding different staff to be able to take on these. Fortunately, we have a strong team that believe in the vision, and they also see their growth with the company, and we train accordingly. And again, I'm very much a part of the interview process. I believe that's continuously going to be the case for now in terms of being able to find educators that are truly passionate about what they do and, finding teachers that want to be eventually admin and they want to work up to be able to monitor and manage their own school site. And this gives them the opportunity to do so. And again, in our school says it all, the Modern Schoolhouse, we're modern. We're revolutionizing what childcare is, but we're also redesigning it as time goes on. We're not the 60-year-old company that's going to say, we're sticking to our methods and that's that. And if you don't like it, get out. The world evolves and we have to be able to evolve our early childhood education space in order for our kids to be able to meet the needs of what the world is demanding.
One of the things that I see stop people from growing, and you won't expect me to say this, many don't, is the lack of processes and procedures, systems,
Mhm.
right? I got to believe with your teaching discipline background and then a lawyer with a discipline, you guys have procedures and processes because otherwise for you to grow like you are and even pass it on to new employees without a lot of procedures, processes, understanding, can you just speak to structure that you had to create when you were small that's allowed you to expand and how that structure changes where maybe you're just talking to the person sitting next to you and suddenly it's no longer that way. It has to be documented or wherever you want to go. I just am saying it to explain the question, but I think many entrepreneurs think procedures and processes are for big corporations. They don't realize that they're important in all size companies.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. If you don't have a system in place, it's going to cause a lot of confusion. And then now you have to remember in childcare, you're not only dealing with staff and employees, you're dealing with children, you're also dealing with parents, you're dealing with grandparents, and you're dealing with babysitters. And there's a lot of opportunity for cross communication. So this is not your typical sales business where, a customer comes in to buy something, and that's just that simple transaction. The transaction here is the child, and there's a lot of people in between, or caregivers in between that we have to make sure our information, our system stays stays intact. That way our documentation stays intact, because if anything does happen, or if any misinformation is relayed or information is forgotten, we have the background or the roster or the running record to be able to show that. And again, that comes with expansion, that comes with growth. Did I have this day one? Absolutely not, because I was running it. I think as an entrepreneur, if there's any advice, if you are looking to grow, is everything that's in your brain, you need to write down, because
Beautiful.
eventually,
Yep.
as you grow, it's not going to just be you operating this, and not everyone, you can't read anyone's mind. You can't, no one can do it like you. So you also have to have the expectation that I have to be able to execute this, but I have to understand that not everyone's going to execute it to the formality that I am, because this is my business. And
Right.
so those levels of expectation may not fully get there, but they'll hit that 90% mark. And you have to understand that's part of expansion. But the best you can do is provide them the information, the resources to be able to be successful.
That is so true. So many times in my CFO turnaround days, I once I got the company stable, we had to actually backtrack to get the processes because there was no way to grow. They didn't put the processes
Yeah.
in place, so they grew awkwardly. They grew without good procedures. So
Yeah.
here's another interesting aspect. You were talking about funding and a new company and having difficulty. What was it like now with 5 years? Did the financing seem different? Did they speak to you on a different level? Was it easier? How was that?
Yeah, of course. I think after COVID, it shifted a lot, and the childcare industry definitely took a hit, because, parents were now homeschooling, and now you see this in TK, and the childcare industry is still getting hit. And that's because with California now, with Gavin Newsom passing the law of, hey, TK is now going to be in elementary schools, and now private schools are adding TK, and now these are pulling students from early childhood education centers.
Okay.
And, a lot of parents they staggered this over a 3-year span. And so it confused a lot of parents. But then now some are like, I'm going to wait until they're 4 to enroll them. And now the backlash is a lot of teachers that are credentialed teaching TK in an elementary school are saying, hey, these kids are having accidents. I'm not trained to be able to change diapers. They don't have any skills of socializing with students because they're now 4 years old and this is their first time entering. And it's causing a lot of friction between what's happening. And I think schools are still trying to get to some sort of normalcy. Where they can kind of get back to those pre-COVID days where their enrollments were at high or at capacity without the limitations placed on just, a fight or flight in terms of trying to get attendance just to meet their numbers for budgeting purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where you really have to stay up because rules and regulations can change the game quickly as well. You
Yes.
never know. You never know what is going to happen. So when do you see all of the different locations opening? Are they opening at the same time? Are they opening different times? How are you handling that?
Yeah, so right now we're projecting to have all of the schools open within fall. But again, with construction and build outs, things always change. One of the rules that I've learned is to always have an additional 20% overhead, and then also give yourself a 3 to 5 month buffer in terms of deadlines and construction dates. And that's just kind of where we're going at now, but we do hope to open in that late fall around September time.
How exciting. Did you ever even fathom back when you were doing the in-house that it was going to come to this degree? Did you ever fathom?
No, at that time, I think it was such a high up from being unemployed and getting out of COVID that I felt like I was comfortable there.
Yeah.
But when you start realizing, I think working with children, and this goes for any business, when you realize the impact that you make, whether you're doing servicing, your business at birthday parties or you're selling at farmers market, you realize your small passion project could be something larger because of the impact that you're making. And I think that's what encourages a lot of small businesses to grow, is the impact that you see. It's not necessarily the revenue that you're generating, or, the cute documentation or your cute sign. All of that is the small stuff. But when you actually have the passion to grow or have the ability to grow, it's because you see something greater of the greater good that's happening here.
I love that, and I always love the expression, "May you serve something greater than yourself," and people always think, "Oh, I gotta go out and find service," and in actuality, just being who you are and letting your light and your passion, your ideas shine through can lead you to that pathway exactly where you're wanting to go.
Yeah.
Where do you see in the future? I mean, you're expanding, expanding. Do you have any vision that you're seeing down the road?
No, at this point, I think we're, actually, yes, we're right now in the process of not only expanding, but we're working on creating our own app. And our goal is, to be able to market to families that are not in our region or in our state to be able to use our services and kind of pivot to a e-learning platform. So that's something that's definitely down the road. We're in the beta stage for our app developing, and that's kind of something our schools will start to use. And then from there, we'll have a subscription based model where families that are in different states that, have been exposed to our curriculum or our lessons, will be able to use that material at home with their children and kind of get some
Beautiful,
insight on.
beautiful. Which brings me to one of the parts I wanted to hit before we ended today. So, Sue, I just want to give you the platform. Tell us about your school. Many people, I've seen some different questions about do you work with these kids? Do you work with that kids? What do you, I just want you to take over and give us some idea what your school does, who it does it for. Give us the whole rundown on your school.
Yeah, so the Modern Schoolhouse is right now we're located in Eagle Rock in Pasadena, opening in Pasadena, Duarte, I mean, sorry, San Gabriel. But we're opening in Pasadena, San Mateo, and Duarte this fall. We generally serve students from 0 to 5 years old, but again, based on location, the age may change. So, like for example, our Eagle Rock and San Gabriel locations start at toddlers, which is 18-month olds. Um, we service all students and families, and we have a diligent process of how we enroll families for our wait list. We use tours as a guide for us to be able to teach families. So outside of just what you see on our website is wonderful, but we want families to make non-transactional decisions based on what you learn about the program and why it's so important. When we welcome families in for tours, we go through a comprehensive tour from top to bottom about everything that we offer, including our curriculum, also including our pedagogy, which is based on the whole child approach. The whole child approach is something that's been taken away from many of the younger classrooms, and I think it's very important doing my work in education for all of these years to bring back. Whole child approach focuses on multiple domains for every child, not just play-based learning, not just social emotional learning, but it also encompasses cognitive, adversity, intellectual, and spatial and spiritual. And all of these things make well for a well-rounded individual on how to be able to problem solve, but how to independently play and also work in a team group while having the emotional volatility of a child, but learning how to be able to control it. We offer full day care only because we believe our program should be part of a structured routine for children. Therefore, you can't gain that type of stuff with part time. And we're welcome to all families. And, something that we've learned along the way is we're working on being able to help families either through scholarships or state funded programs to be able to join our program since we are currently a private program.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love hearing about anything that is looking at the holistic part of being a human being. I think we've been segmented and dissected and led to say, put this in this box and this in this box, and we've been torn apart from our original spiritual being. I'm not talking about
Yeah.
any religion, I'm just saying spiritual being. I think to bring kids and let them be whole is
Yeah.
just such a wonderful thing. Now, in the last couple minutes, and I don't even know if this warrants being asked because you've given so much wisdom to entrepreneurs. I mean, it's like I'm almost like asking you to go above for the extra mile because you've given us so much wisdom. But can I say any additional information or wisdom you would like to leave with our audience and our entrepreneurs today?
Yeah, I think overall, as you continue to embark on your entrepreneurial journey, remember you're going to be your biggest fan, you're going to be your biggest supporter, you're also going to be your biggest critic. And all of that, you have to learn to give yourself grace. You have to give yourself the opportunity to take a moment to step out of it. And I think it's important to always remember that you're going to be your biggest leader, your critic, and your inspiration. And if you have all three and you find yourself going through that, you're on the right path.
That is so true. That is so true. It always is. Life isn't easy. Life is a journey, but every time we seek out passions and we go beyond our comfort zone, we take ourselves and I think the whole world with us one step brighter and one step bigger. I think that's wonderful. It has been just fantastic talking with you today. What a amazing story, and I can't help but make a statement that all this was within 5 years, Sue. I mean, I know it probably seems like a very long time, but I would say this comes under that concept of meteoric rise. I mean, 5 years, you've done a lot in the 5 years, plus a baby and everything. It must be like, wow, what a whirlwind it's been.
Yeah, no, it's been great. I think I've grown, my husband's grown. We've been fortunate enough to not have the childcare issues that many, working parents face in terms of we have the ability to be able to take our kids.
Um,
I had the ability to be with my daughter until the age of 5, starting from COVID. And then now she's, thriving at her new school. So it's been great to see all of that and have the comfort of knowing all of the benefits that have reaped from it. So, while again you attain and you look at entrepreneurship as a financial gain, you also have to be appreciative of the process of what the other things that have come along your way that don't have monetary value.
Beautiful story. Anybody in the audience, we have Sue's information been put in the chat repeatedly. Please, if you have any questions about her school, get into the chat and grab her information. And Sue, also a special shout out. I know you've got a lot of things going on today, and you made time specially to be on this show and had to rearrange your calendar to do so. I want to say that I can tell you, even from if you look at the chat real quick, the amount of thank yous and the comments you're getting, you definitely were appreciated by the audience with all that you shared. So thank you so much for being here today.
Of course, you're welcome, and thank you again for having me.
And of course, I'm going to have to invite you back in the next 6 months or a year because
Yes, I would
it's
love to.
too
I'm
exciting.
actually in the Bay Area right now and I'm headed to our San Mateo location soon. So we'll have to do a follow-up for that.
But we have to because there's so much going on. So with that, I'm going to bring Sadie back in a second here, and I'm reminder to everybody that when close off and say goodbye, Sadie stays here. The chat stays open. You're able to get the information or any comments remaining in the chat. Sadie, wasn't that fascinating?
I mean, that was amazing. I mean, I love how, we always talk about this, but when things happen, you never know where they can lead you. And sometimes when something seems like, oh no, it's like, it's actually no, it's going to take you somewhere where you were meant to be to do something greater.
It's so true. We can't get caught up on anything that happens to us. Just take a look at it and say, well, let's see what happens now. It's just a big journey. It's just a big journey, guys. Well, I want to say a special thank you to my frequent flyers, the common names I see all the time. I kind of glanced a little bit and saw you out there. Thank you so much. If you are new to the show, please tune into us weekly. We always have great discussions where we learn there's good, bad, and ugly to being an entrepreneur, but it's a wonderful thing to be at the same time. So I'm going to sign off now. I'm going to say thank you to everybody for watching Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. Thank you again to our guests, Sue and Sadie, for always holding everything down for us. See you next week. Bye.
Bye. Alrighty, guys. So I am here. I'm putting some in the chat window for you. I know we got a lot of information here, so if you don't see something that you do need, let me know. But yes, so I got the contact info for our speaker today. I'm putting Lori's info in here. And then if you're not a client of the SBDC, please reach out to us. A whole lot of stuff in there. So don't worry, I'm going to hang out for a few and you can just click, click, click away because I know that's a little bit tricky doing the copying and the pasting. So just go for the clicks, sign up. Don't worry, I'll be here. No need to stress out that you won't have enough time. Just let me know if you're missing anything, okay?